Hello everyone, and welcome to Dark Natter, the podcast where we delve deep into the blackest depths of the darkest, murkiest fiction. I'm John Richter.
And I'm Liam Martin.
And today we are going to dissect... no, I've fucked up the intro. That's a good start, isn't it? You'd think after 20-odd episodes I've got this quite slick by now.
Do you know what? And that was one of our smoothest intros ever as well. There was no messing about. There was no... me butting in early and...
doing a laugh to throw me off the track. Maybe I was expecting you to pull some sort of prank.
You probably were, actually, yeah.
And that's what threw me.
You fucked up, mate. You fucked up.
Oh, just blown. I'll never live this down. Oh, well. Let's leave it in.
I think so, yeah. It's organic.
I'm not going to edit. This is it. It's raw. It's visceral.
It's raw for me.
As the listeners know by now, we take it in turns to pitch to other a suggested piece of dark fiction, whether that be a book or a film, a video game, a painting, an album,
a theme park ride.
Have we had any others? An internet phenomenon.
Yeah,
we had two of them.
What was the other one?
Slender Man and Salad Fingers.
Oh yeah.
Two internet phenomena in there. So whatever it is, one of us pitches it, makes a case for why it deserves a place inside its own private cell in one of the many wings in the cavernous, corrupt... I am literally making this up as I go along. I need to think of another word that begins with C. Creepy corridors of the Hall of Pain. It's quite funny because with the crap sound, because we're obviously doing this remotely and it cuts out. It kind of cut out a bit during your laugh.
Well, it cut out when you were doing yours as well, so I wasn't sure when to laugh.
But of course, when we put this together, it won't. It'll be seamless. No one will know. Peek behind the curtain. It's your go, isn't it?
It is, and my pitch to other is a video game pitch. As you all know, you don't know, but I work in the video game industry.
You're like a luminary. Is that right?
I think hack is closer to.
Hack. Yeah, you got promoted from luminary to hack.
Clickbait douchebag, I've been called.
That's it. I knew I'd got your title wrong. Sorry, clickbait douchebag hack.
But yeah, so I'm obviously a big fan of video games. I do it for a living. So I'm pitching a video game series.
Fair enough.
Called Bioshock.
Wow.
Have you heard of it?
It just complete coincidence, but it is the original Bioshock is my second favourite video game of all time.
Oh, so I wonder if it'll get into the Hall of Pain then.
You probably, you might really cock it up.
Yeah.
And you might pitch it so badly
which is probably likely. So yeah.
So you've still got to keep you on your toes. And what I will say, spoiler alert, is this. I flipping hate, that's a strong word, I dislike Bioshock Infinite, the third game. Strongly dislike it.
I don't. But
you love it, don't you?
I don't love it, but I like it.
Always banging on about it, like, hey Liam.
I've never mentioned it.
Do you want to come to the pub? Why don't you come to the pub for once? I'm too busy playing Bioshock Infinite because I love it. I'm going to marry it. Sure, that happened.
Prick.
It's banter in it. It's not very good banter.
So yeah, would you kindly tell everybody a little bit about the first game? I know it's my pitch, but you're just better at summing these things up.
Oh, that's very sweet of you. I think I ramble on for ages, but I'll try and...
And I can't be asked.
Yes, exactly. It makes perfect sense. I'll do a concise summary then.
Well, hang on. We've got at least half an hour to fill, so take your time, buddy.
Well, we've got 3 games, though, haven't we? Although the plot
true.
to the second one is bollocks, and I can't even remember it, so that won't take long. So, Bioshock is set in, I believe, 1960. So you've got this very kind of like 1950s aesthetic. It was a 2007 video game, so it came out on...
Oh, that long ago. That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? That game is like over 50... No, hang on, I can't do maths. Nearly 15 years old.
2007, did you say?
Good job I don't work in finance. 2007, yeah. So 13 years ago.
Unlucky for some.
unlucky for the protagonist of this particular narrative. And I got it on the PS3. It obviously came out on an array of other platforms. You can get it on Windows and Xbox and all that stuff. But it's interesting, actually. The whole series of the Bioshock games, all three of them, they're all on that same generation. So it kind of died a death and never made it to
Well, we'll
PS4.
talk about that later. But very odd that, yeah. Do you know what? I'm trying to rack my brains, and I can't actually remember which platform I had it on, because I don't know. I think that was the PS3 as well. But
anyway. Got it really late, like years after it came out, because I did that stupid thing that I always do, which is everyone said it was really good. It was winning like Game of the Year awards and all sorts. And I don't know, I just somehow it put me off, and I was like, oh, I can't really be bothered, and I'll get round to it. And then I just never did. And then eventually it was like, right, loads of people are telling me, you'll love Bioshock, John. why don't you should get on it? And so I finally caved in and bought it, I don't know, 5 years after it came out.
Wow.
And flipping, I loved it. It's so good. And it's like, tick, 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 everything I could possibly want from a video game, this game did it. Which I'll try and explain.
You kind of did that with Dark Souls as well, didn't you?
Exactly the same thing. Really late to the party. I do it with loads of things. I'm always just a bit quite far behind the times, basically. But so it means like there's these big things that crop up and are really well regarded. I miss them, and then years later I cave in, and then I'm suddenly going, "Oh my god, have you ever played Dark Souls?" And everyone's like, "Yeah, man, 10 years ago, jackass." So set in 1960, the protagonist, whose name is Jack. It opens with him on a plane, so it depicts him opening a letter that I think he's been given, and then the camera, the cutscene kind of fades to black, and you hear the sounds of screaming and general mayhem, and it's clear that the plane is crashing. There has been some horrendous, mechanical problem or whatever. He wakes up or comes to, regains consciousness after the crash, submerged in the sea. You have to kind of struggle your way to the surface, burst into surface breathless, nearly drowned, to find yourself surrounded by all this flaming wreckage. And all you can do is swim towards the nearest sort of bit of land, which luckily there seems to be some land quite nearby in the middle of this desolate...
It's a lighthouse, isn't it?
It's a lighthouse, so it's a bit of land with a lighthouse on it, swims towards it. As he heads into the lighthouse, you quickly start to realise that this is a very odd, peculiar place that he's found. And there are all sorts of these kind of propaganda slogans and these grand sort of banners and statues inside. And I remember that one, it's got statue of some bloke, and it's got it says, "No gods or kings, only man." And you think, what's this? Head down into the lighthouse, I think that's right. No, I guess normally you would go up them, but you end up in a place that's got this big round, a sphere in effect, like a glass kind of some sort of vehicle. He gets inside, and the sphere automatically submerges, and he begins this journey down into the sea. So at the moment you're in the same position as the protagonist. You're like, what the hell's going on? Why am I trapped in this sphere? Where is this taking me? And then the soundtrack is fantastic, and I'll note to self, must cut that in, the bit of music that plays at this point. And you see this fantastic kind of ocean scene where there's all, whales and fish, and then out of, on the bottom of the seabed, there is a city, like this huge city, like a metropolis, and you're like, what the hell is this? And it's funny actually that the game's called Bioshock when you think about it, because it really should be called like Aquashock or something.
Yeah.
The bio doesn't quite kind of make sense. Of course, that's a reference to its spiritual predecessor, which are the System Shock games.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Which I've never played.
You should.
Have you played System Shock 2? That's the one.
That's the one. No, I haven't, no.
In some ways, maybe that's testament to just how good Bioshock is, that even without having played the sort of revered System Shock and System Shock 2, we still love it so much.
Yeah. I gotta say, you talking about the sort of introduction, the opening sort of section, one of the best opening sections to any video game, I would say, because
it's amazing.
There's no action in it. Sometimes I think it was during that particular console generation where the standard tutorial kind of went, and they were trying to go for these kind of like bombastic sort of movie style openings where you kind of learn the ropes as well. I sort of think of like Mass Effect 3, loads of other examples, but this one it's just very mysterious, very intriguing. It really sets the mood perfectly, and when you get down to the underwater city, when you just see it for the first time, and it is incredible. It really makes you want to play more and find out what the hell this is all about.
Yeah, and they also there is like almost like a what I think is a pre-recorded message playing to the visitor to the city who's been transported in by this bathysphere, which is a real word, by the way. It's a real thing, the bathysphere. People used to use them for like deep sea diving.
That's right.
Like dead thick glass or thick whatever it was.
You had one in your short story collection, didn't you?
I did. I had an unrealistically big one to enable the plot of a murder mystery on the bottom of the sea to occur, which was I enjoyed writing that. It
was good. It was good, that one. Yeah,
heavily Bioshock inspired and a lot of Lovecraft going on as well. But thank you for that. And so you've got this recorded message by Andrew Ryan, who is this kind of patriarch, I guess, or founder of the city. And he's kind of explaining his whole reasoning behind building Rapture, as we learn that it's called, this city under the sea. And I'll cut it in so I don't need to remember it, but he says things like, shouldn't a man be entitled to the sweat of his own brow? No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. And he's basically saying he is a champion of, I guess, what you'd call kind of free market forces, uber capitalism, absolutely no government intervention whatsoever. Just whoever does the most hard work or the most innovative work, like, you reap the benefits and fuck everyone else. That's basically his kind of politics.
I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone. I rejected those answers. Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose Rapture.
And that is credited as kind of inspiring the game's creator, Ken Levine, is the book Atlas Shrugged by Ayn... Is that how you pronounce it? Ayn Rand? Never know how to say that. So much so that Andrew Ryan is a kind of clunky, not quite anagram of her name, the author of that book. I had a go at reading it, and it was shit. You ever tried Atlas Shrugged?
I haven't, no. I haven't.
It's just an impenetrable... Really, it's not particularly badly written. It's more dull and long. Yeah, and she's really enthralled to kind of champions of industry, and just it's like, all right, I get your point. Yeah, industry's really good, and the government's attempts to clamp down on it and rein in the market and try and control it are bad, in your opinion. I understand that. You didn't need to spend the first 200 pages telling me, and the narrative hasn't gone anywhere, and I'm bored of this, sod it. So I couldn't, unfortunately. A lot of people slag off her books and her work, and I wanted to kind of get something from it because of this game, but I didn't. It sucked, I'm afraid.
Thank God she's not vying for a place in the Hall of Fame.
And she's probably not listening either.
Probably not.
Well, you never know.
She's dead.
Is she dead? Yeah. I don't know. I don't really know when it was written.
She died the year I was born.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, 1982.
So could you be a reincarnation?
Oh, fuck, yes. She died on March the 6th, 2 days before my birthday.
What? So Liam Rand could be your real identity.
And I do talk a lot of shit as well, impenetrable shit. So yeah,
all that philosophical bollocks you're always talking, and you hate poor people. You know, there's that too. You like. You built that underwater city that time.
I did. I forgot about
that. I've run out of steam on this.
Would you kindly continue, sir?
Well done. Well, having had this big sales pitch for why Rapture is so amazing, we finally dock, and actually we don't yet emerge, because you very quickly realise that, contrary to Andrew Ryan's proclamations, Rapture is an absolutely fucked shithole, to use a polite term. Everything's fallen to bits. It's all dark. There's sparking electronic knackered things, and what can only be described as a horrific, monstrously malformed woman with hooks for hands appears and starts trying to hack her way into the bathysphere to murder you. And you're like, flipping heck, that's a jarring contrast to the grand sort of spectacle outside.
Yeah, as I say, it's an excellent opening.
It's brilliant. It's like it's like walking up a red carpet into a hotel and then getting in the hotel to find it's been completely gutted, burnt down, and there are people trying to kill you inside it on reception.
It's interesting as well, because would you call this a horror game?
I would call it a horror game. It is a first-person action game, but I would say it has enough horror in it to be considered a horror game. But I totally get why some people would debate that.
Because particularly that scene when, it's dark, it is quite... Well, the whole game is quite dark, isn't it? And dingy, and very good sound effects. And so, it definitely has kind of horror elements, doesn't it? Yeah, I never think of it as a horror game.
But the pacing of that opening sequence, the whole beginning to the game, is completely horror-like. Yeah. Because you've got the kind of, strangeness of the situation of arriving in Rapture, and then suddenly completely subverts your expectations. Oh, it's not a grand city under the sea like Atlantis. It's an absolute hellhole.
Yeah.
But then we get you perhaps hadn't noticed it, or as a player you wouldn't have noticed it to this point, but there is like a radio inside the bathysphere, and it's got this kind of... The technology in the game is one of those weird... It's not quite steampunk, is it? But it's that weird mashup of stuff that was available in the 50s, plus lots of liberties taken with the science.
Yeah.
But you still, it's a crackly radio kind of... standard of kind of portable communication. It's not a blooming mobile phone or a chip in your ear or anything like that. It's not a codec like in Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
And the voice through the radio is the lovely, friendly Atlas, who's, I'm Atlas and I'm here to get you out of... What does he say? I won't leave you twisting in the wind, he says. And he tells you... He demonstrates, he explains to you that he's a benefactor. He's someone else who's trapped down in the city and you can help each other. And he demonstrates his ability to sort of manipulate or control some of the city's electronic systems, because he sort of activates this weird kind of crappy hovering drone thing to shoot bullets at the monstrous woman that's trying to carve you up, and drives her away and saves your life.
Nice guy.
Yeah, seems like a nice guy. And he gives you the, would you kindly find yourself a weapon like a wrench or whatever? It's like he's real stereotype kind of Irish thing going on. I heard that in, when they do like beta testing or whatever you'd call it, like focus groups?
Yeah.
He was much more of like what's the word I'm looking for? Like those old-fashioned old American dudes?
Yeah, I know what you mean, actually. Yeah, I can't think of the...
I can't sort of even conjure up the voice, but like all what these kind of like old... a patriotic kind of character.
Yeah.
But apparently that character didn't go down well, and people thought he sounded like a dick instead of like a trustworthy, nice guy. So they changed Atlas to this Irish kind of stereotype.
Makes sense.
But to be fair, he has got quite a sympathetic story. His family, I think he's trying to rescue his family and make it out of the city, and he he explains how basically a kind of civil war between Andrew Ryan and a prominent emerging sort of criminal leader called Frank Fontaine has just kind of completely ruined the city. Everyone, there's that kind of flies in the face of Andrew Ryan's own politics, because he's supposed to be fully supportive of anyone doing whatever they want to get ahead and make money, and yet he's feuding with this guy just because this guy's done too good a job. So he's a bit of a hypocrite then. And meanwhile, everyone, because they've discovered this kind of gene splicing technology, which I guess is where the bio bit comes in, everyone's been kind of driven into these crazed, deformed, mutant, hybrid monsters that are splicers, as Atlas would say. They're all spliced up and they've gone mad. And
you're
become...
good at this.
Well, thank you. I'm very much winging it. And they become the kind of the main... If Andrew Ryan is the main antagonist, because we soon learn that Fontaine has actually been defeated and killed, then the splicers are the kind of meat and potatoes of the enemies that you're going to fight.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that whole kind of the game in itself? You're moving from location to location, battling the splicers. How do you find that pans out?
Pretty good, actually. In terms of gameplay, we'll talk about that a bit later in how it compares to the other games. Because looking back, I find the kind of combat a little bit clumsy.
In the first one,
yeah,
I think that's a fair comment.
But I think they do a very good job of kind of justifying why you're moving from point to point, why you're taking on these particular enemies, and it doesn't. Some games you play for 20 minutes just to get to another cutscene, and that kind of bit you play in between, it's kind of meaningless. Well, in this,
that's that kind of what do they say, the ludo narrative dissonance.
Yes,
if I'm using
that's
the right phrase,
yeah.
Where it's almost like, we've got here's some game right now, here's some plot,
exactly.
Now here's some more. Whereas this feels like a pretty cohesive whole. I have to fight my way through this location to do this thing, and there'll be a bit of a cutscene when you do the thing, but it sort of hangs together.
One thing Bioshock did very well as well was the environment itself is just phenomenal. It's the setting in the first Bioshock, hands down, one of the best in any video game.
Amazing. Art Deco kind of
exactly.
Sprawling sort of utopia that's completely gone unravelled, and it looks like it's like the party at the end of the world. It's like they were literally having their New Year's Eve party in 1959, and then it just all fucking went to hell.
And there's so much kind of that you can pick up about the city of Rapture just through the art style and the environment you pass through. But then they also add these, you get a lot of these audio logs as you go along. Don't think it was the first game to do that, but I do think it was arguably, I'd have to go back and check this out, but I do kind of remember at the time it was the game that sort of popularised that whole, you collect an audio log and it just gives you a bit of extra flavour as you're going along.
And it was a brilliant way of introducing a load of backstory, a load of characters. It didn't disrupt the gameplay because you could listen to them while you were playing.
Exactly.
It was and probably kind of low cost, because all you had to do as a developer was pay an actor to read some lines. You didn't have to make a load of animation to go with it. So
I think in terms of the way the whole game comes together, the marriage of game and plot in the original Bioshock is superb.
Agree completely.
Games for years have kind of, we talk about cinematic games, like it's very cinematic, which is kind of a bollocks term really, but in terms of like I said, marrying gameplay with story, flawlessly doing it without any kind of sort of juddering.
Amazing achievement. Like I remember just feeling like it was almost like games had like upped the game. Before that we'd had I don't know, we'd had Metal Gear Solid, and that had felt very, certainly was very cinematic in the sense that it was just trying to be like a movie, and you almost felt quite passive as the player watching these massive cutscenes that got completely stupid by the sequels. Whereas this felt like you've got a game where I'm immersed virtually constantly doing things. I'm not passive, but it's telling me this very visually stimulating story with this incredible kind of environment.
And even though it's quite a slow game, a very methodical game, you've always got, like, largely because of these audio logs and just the environment itself, you've always got something to kind of sort of distract you and sort of keep you interested. Yeah, really.
Brilliant.
So I think it does a very good job.
And among many kind of great ideas, characters, all that stuff, it's worth finishing off that introduction sequence where Jack, you, the protagonist, you end up finding this kind of daft, ridiculously huge kind of hypodermic needle syringe. And then in a bit that did jar with me at the time, like, why the hell would you do this? Although we'll come back to that when we talk about where the plot goes. He injects the syringe full of sparking blue electricity into his veins, which knocks him kind of semi-unconscious while this potent sort of whatever it is takes effect. And while he's in this semi-unconscious state, a weird duo approach him. One of them is a little girl, but she has this kind of haunting, weird voice that sounds kind of distorted, and she's like, "Look, Mr. Bubbles, it's an angel." And then her companion is this massive, lumbering, grotesque kind of Hulk in a deep-sea diving suit, metal helmet. You can't see you can't see his face or anything. And he's, he can't speak. He just groans with, like, half pain, half he's just so bulky and muscly that's what his voice sounds like. And he's got a massive drill arm. Yeah. And this is where we first meet the little sisters and the big daddies.
Big daddies, hands down, one of the best. I was going to say baddies, but they're not really.
No, it's interesting that they're kind of neutral, aren't they? They just stomp around the city, making repairs, looking after their little sister.
But you do have to fight them. So that one of the best sort of video game monster enemies that sort of ever. Again, really, really good. Well, great design.
Yeah, brilliant, memorable design. It was the thing that's on all the covers. And that relationship they have, where each one of them is kind of tethered to a little sister. You almost feel a bit sorry for them, don't you? Because they're very, like, honourable in a way. They're just ambling around, going about their own business. Yeah. They only attack people, splicers, if they threaten the little sister. And she's just going about her business too. It's just that her business is absolutely disgustingly horrific, because she's draining the spliced up blood, in effect, from corpses, drinking it, because only these little sisters are able to they sort of recycle the biological material and produce this substance known as Adam. Adam is the substance that enables the splicing and the genetic modification that grants all these weird powers and mutations to the city's kind of citizens. And you could argue it's a bit, why did he make it that they were little girls? It doesn't really make sense. There's no reason for them to have to have been infants. But I guess it was almost like rule of cool. Like, oh, won't it be cool if there are little creepy girls knocking about drinking blood and they have a great big huge armoured behemoth as their pet monster? And it is cool.
Yeah, that was funny when you explained that, because when I decided to do a Bioshock, which I had absolutely no idea this is what we were going to do beforehand. I was thinking, it's pretty straightforward to explain, but when you start adding in, little sisters and big daddies and Adam and Eve, so I was like, actually, there's a lot of shit you need to explain. If any listeners out there have never played it,
they'll already be like, "What?"
I kind of be thinking, like, "What the fuck is going on here? Like, what are you talking about?"
It is a weird old plot, and there's loads of stuff we're not even going to mention. Maybe there is a way to almost jump to the end, because I do think that the big daddies and the little sisters, they're all part of the environment. They're just like cool stuff for you to interact with and do battle with. And the splicers, to some extent, are the same. They're all part of this still. It's almost like a functioning dystopia. Like, the city still, it hasn't completely flooded, although there are flooded segments. The repairs are still getting done by these mindless big daddy drones. the splicers still, although they're all mindless, cackling, homicidal maniacs, stuff is still happening. The first level's kind of boss is that deranged plastic surgeon. He's that is awful, isn't it? He's doing botched art projects on.
Yeah, very creepy.
What
very
a
creepy.
scumbag. Oh, and there's so much to talk about. Like, even the game's AI, I remember being amazed, but because there are these healing stations, you can heal your health up if you go to them. But then when you're fighting him, when you've shot him a few times, he can go and use them, which was to me was a revelation. And then take it to the next step, you can hack the terminals so that when he goes to use them to heal himself, he gets electrocuted.
That was another. Even though I do think the original game is a little bit clunky to play, the one thing I did like about it, and I know you like this as well, is the way you can the different ways you can approach these battles.
Yeah.
You can sort of lay lots of traps, if you will, because you get all these different powers, or you can just react on the flow. You can go in all guns blazing, or you can draw things out to kind of get stuck in your traps and everything. So yeah, it did some interesting things.
Yeah, and a lot of those power-ups were really ingenious. Like I touched earlier and then forgot to finish off that the injection that Jack gives himself is a plasmid, and these are special powers, and there's a lot of kind of elemental powers. So the first one you get is electricity, so you can not only electrocute splicers, but you can also manipulate doors and switches and things. Yeah. And so there's kind of obvious ones. You can freeze stuff, you can melt stuff with fire, so you can leave these kind of fire traps. But then they got some really creative, later in the game, you can get a hornet one.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
He's blasting these disgusting, massive hornets out of his hand. And that, the animation of them all coming out of his hand is really disturbing.
Complete bollocks.
Yes,
but yeah,
absolute bollocks. It doesn't hang together at all, but rule of cool, man.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it does some interesting things. Yeah.
I was just going to say, although we've kind of covered the early stage of the plot and the setting, I am now going to do a massive spoiler. So if you want to play Bioshock, you don't know the ending, and you don't want the big spoiler, then I don't know when to say skip ahead to, because we haven't recorded it yet. Maybe just turn it off and go and play it. Or just put your fingers in your ears for a bit and we'll
come back in 10 minutes.
Yeah, there you go. I'll restrain myself. I'll make sure I've covered it in 10 minutes. So seamless. I think that was pretty seamless. Right, spoiler territory. So the big ending is you find your way to Andrew Ryan. Atlas has told you that you're going to need to bump this guy off in order to get your freedom and his family's freedom as well. Andrew Ryan's has Andrew Ryan already blown up his family at this stage? Sorry. So by this point, Atlas is just out for revenge, and you want to knock him off as well so you can escape from his city. You manage to kind of hack your way into he's kind of almost in Hitler style. He's locked down in a bit of a bunker, like an armoured kind of hidey hole, and it's only when you make it in there that Andrew Ryan kind of reveals, you basically find out the truth of what's been happening, which is that Atlas is manipulating you using, in effect, what would you call it? In effect, hypnosis. So you've been kind of pre-programmed. There is a word for that, isn't there? A bit is that what the Manchurian Candidate was?
Yeah. Like a sleeper.
Yeah, like a sleeper agent. So it turns out that the plane crashed because you caused it to crash. You injected the plasmid into yourself because you were compelled to. And you're about to murder Andrew Ryan because that's what Atlas wants you to do. And he's been using this trigger phrase, "would you kindly," all the way through to prompt your actions.
There you go. That's why I was saying it.
So good. I mean, still, at that moment when you realise that he's been...
that was brilliant. I didn't see it coming.
No, didn't see it coming. Dave Roberts, our mutual friend Dave Roberts, I remember, I think maybe we were even together while I was playing it for the first time, and I remember us taking the piss out of him saying, "Would you kindly pick up a crowbar?" and laughing about it. So it was almost the game, you suckers, got you.
Yeah.
So then And then brilliantly, it's not just that some bloke called Atlas wants to kill Andrew Ryan for no reason. Atlas is actually Frank Fontaine, kid. He's the gangster who he thought was dead, and this is his master plan to take over the city, you little punk. Which brilliantly means that...
That's good as well, good impression.
Only because I love that voice so much. Like, the last sort of quarter of the game after the big reveal is probably... It loses its... It could have done with being a bit shorter, maybe.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
But it's worth it just so you can listen to Frank Fontaine insulting you and telling you how stupid you are for like 2 hours.
It's like if The Sixth Sense had gone on for another half an hour after you found out about Willis.
Yeah. Oh, you didn't do a spoiler? Oh, it's okay. We're inside our 10 minutes. So.
Well, no, and also I just said found out about Willis.
Oh, you did. That's true. Yeah, good point. Frank, imagine if they did a kind of... Hey, kid, would you kindly stop seeing dead people? It's pissing me off here.
Yeah, I could do it. That'd be good.
Better. And then the big finale is you fight a spliced up Frank Fontaine, and everyone slags off that boss fight and says it's really unimaginative and crap. And yeah, it's not the best, I suppose.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. One last thing might be worth mentioning is the ending that you get. Depends whether you have mistreated or nicely treated the little sisters, because it's possible to liberate them from the sort of biological curse and turn them back into actual little girls who then somehow are able to like escape the city completely easily on their own, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Or you can kill them and harvest them to get more Adam so that you can get better power-ups.
Which is useful, isn't it? But I didn't sit right with me. No, I saved them every time.
Couldn't bring myself. I think I killed one and felt so bad that I just couldn't. Didn't. I felt awful for weeks afterwards. So it was one of these very clunky binary, but early days in some ways for video games, like these real moral choices that have consequences ish.
Yeah,
very unsophisticated one, but it did have that element of, well, I could make the game easier, or I could not kill a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
It's quite a straightforward choice, really.
You made it easier, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're not real kids. Fuck them. So Bioshock 2's plot had you
Well, first of all, let's just finish out by saying, original Bioshock, ace. If we were to turn this, if we were to stop now, Hall of Pain, guaranteed.
Oh, it's a shoe-in. It's so good.
Shoe-in.
But like a lot of things...
Bioshock 2 and Infinite...
Different proposition. Yeah.
Different.
And like a lot of... Again, it's the same with any... It's that hateful term in a franchise. It's like... I sounded like Frank Fontaine then. A franchise. In some ways, it's quite merciful that this ran 3 games and then weirdly fizzled out and they never made any more. Because if we'd have just been getting loads of Bioshocks over and over again, I'm sure it would have just been completely in the toilet by now.
Yeah, agreed.
The second one... So, we won't go into as much detail because we've done a lot of the groundwork, but the second one is, I think it's 10 years later, you are a big daddy this time. So you are, you've got the drill arm, you're massive, you're really powerful, you can beat up multiple splicers. It gives you that kind of power fantasy, or wouldn't it be cool if you got to be a big daddy thing? But the plot is poor. It's not a patch on the original.
No.
It had you sort of, you're trying to rescue your little sister, and the twist is that she's like grown up, and I thought it was rubbish.
I actually played this one again recently because I was always kind of for some reason this is that thing of when you play video game sequels, I think always have the ability to improve on the original. I think whilst movies, generally speaking, if it gets a sequel, the sequel's probably going to be a bit pants. Video games, I think, go either way. I think they can, certainly improve on some of the flaws of the original. However, because the original had such a memorable kind of setting and plot and characters and the twist, Even though I think the gameplay was better in the second one. I thought it was a bit smoother. You
could dual wield. You didn't have to choose between a gun or a plasmid. You could have both. You could be shooting someone with a machine gun and setting them on fire at the same time. Who wouldn't want to do that?
It was definitely more of a fun game to kind of play, but it just didn't have that impact. Same setting, you saw new parts of Rapture, but it just didn't have that kind of moment to moment, like, whoa, what's going to happen next?
It wasn't, and even the city itself, it wasn't a surprise to be, because we've already been there. So it was more Rapture, which was still good because I love Rapture. It had some cool ideas for different settings. The graphics were better, as you say. The gameplay was definitely better, but I just didn't. It was a paltry, like a shadow of the first one in terms of as an overall experience, I thought.
And that's a problem when the first game is so good. It is difficult to top that. If the first game had been like, oh, that's a nice idea. If the first game, games, arcade style games, you can definitely improve on. But something like Bioshock, it was almost, I wouldn't say perfect, but parts of it were so perfect that it was always going to be tough to follow.
Unrepeatable. You should probably mention Bioshock 2 came out 3 years later, so 2010, so still same generation, but they definitely got more out of it in terms of graphics and so on.
Yeah.
And there was also, shortly after it, there was a DLC called Minerva's Den. Have you ever played that?
Yes.
It's brilliant. So that actually, almost contrary to what we just said, that demonstrated that you could tell a new self-contained story in the same setting and it still be very moving and, powerful. Yeah. So, it actually is almost worth getting your hands on Bioshock 2 if you can also get your hands on Minerva's Den just to play that, because you don't have to play the main game to play the DLC. It's a little standalone thing.
Well, just a note, actually, you can get all of these games as part of the Bioshock HD collection
on
or something.
PS4 and current gen consoles.
Yeah, and they've got all the DLC included as well. So,
I didn't know that. So I could play Minerva's Den on my PS4 then. Right. I might make sure I might force her to to watch that then, because it's quite short, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's probably enough on Bioshock 2, really, because it was just more of the same but less good. Whereas Bioshock Infinite was complete. Go on, have a crack at that. What the hell was that all about?
Well, I've got mixed feelings about Bioshock Infinite. I enjoyed it when I played it. I think it's one of those games. We won't go into too much spoiler territory of the plot, but when you kind of think back about the ending and break it down, it's like, actually, I was kind of bollocks. But at the time, I remember being quite like, holy shit, what's going on here? And the actual. And the decision to move it, instead of going underwater to a city, underwater, you're going to a city in the sky. And I think that was I think they needed to do something like that. They probably should have just stopped making the games, if we're being honest. But if they were going to make a third one, I think they did need to do something dramatically different. And I do think the city in the sky idea is solid.
It was great. It was almost like a clever. I mean, I know we all knew that it was a city in the sky because we'd all seen the trailers, but it was still like a great swerve, wasn't it? It starts with this kind of lighthouse again, and you think you're going to be going down in the bathysphere, but instead he's propelled up into this kind of heavenly, celestial sky paradise. And it was like a paradise. That was the other thing. It wasn't knackered and dark and decrepit and full of monsters. It was just like a lovely buzzing. There's like a little barbershop quartet singing. Interestingly, singing songs from the wrong time period. So they were singing like modern songs, which is quite a cool idea. I may not always love you, but long as there are stars above you.
And you got around, you had these like sky rails, so you would attach to these sky rails and they would kind of like whiz you around to different parts, which kind of played into the combat as well. You would have these kind of self-contained areas where you had to kill everything, and you could whiz around. So it was much faster than the first two games. I think it was a much better game to actually play.
Which is funny, is we often are quite aligned on what we like to play, or certainly I feel like we usually see eye to eye, but I hate the gameplay in Bioshock Infinite. I found it really
I know, I remember you
it just
saying
felt like
it,
I couldn't do all my traps and cleverly approach each little, and it's because it's these big arena battles, which I know are more kind of popular these days. Bioshock Infinite came out in 2013, so we're heading into more contemporary. It's a bit like Doom, the new Doom remakes. I like them, but I like the old ones better because it was like cramped corridors and close encounters, not just I'm just Call of Duty, I'm being shot with bullets from all over the place, I can't even see who's shooting me, I'm dead. Like, it's not for me.
Don't get me wrong, I think comparing it to other first person sort of action games, it's not as good, but I just remember the original Bioshock I found at times a little bit the gameplay, the actual combat sort of scenarios just a little, like I said, a bit clunky, and I found this one much smoother, and I didn't have a problem with it, although I mean, of course they could have improved it, but I don't know, maybe I'm just very forgiving to Bioshock.
Oh no, you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it more, you enjoyed it, that is, and a lot of people did. The game got some really, really good reviews. Interestingly, it also got very good reviews for the next thing I'm going to touch on, which has subsequently turned into a massive backlash.
Yeah.
Which is around. So one of the other big reveals or big subversions in that opening sequence, we should probably just quickly mention why your character is there. So in the third Bioshock, you are. Is he called Booker DeWitt? He's he's like a boozed up Pinkerton agent, possibly a disgraced crap one, and he's hired to go and rescue a girl from Columbia. It's called, isn't it? The city in the sky.
Columbia.
Was that right. Like what America was originally gonna be called because of Christopher Columbus? There's some reference to like it's some sort of patriotic Confederate type reference, isn't it?
She's like. Columbia is like the female personification of the USA.
Oh, okay. I've got it. I didn't know that. And so Booker he's up there to bring back this girl, and you play through that opening sequence where you're trying to find out where she is, and you're in this kind of idyllic city, and then I think there's a stage, something happening on stage, and everyone's gathering, and that's when there's some sleazy, slimy kind of all-American sort of whatever guy, and I can't even remember what it is they're doing. Are they about to like execute someone or whatever it is? But in effect, it's revealed that the entire city are completely despicable racists, like white supremacists.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And the guy who's in charge of the city, almost the kind of Andrew Ryan equivalent in this new story, is called Comstock. I can't remember his first name.
That's right, yeah.
And he is just a racist, just a massive, horrible racist. And so there's this really, up to that point, there hasn't been any gore. And then the next thing you know, you're kind of shoving your grappling hook air spike thing into this racist guy's face and his blood flying everywhere. And you're like, yeah, take that, you bastard, you deserve it. And that was really satisfying, wasn't it, that opening? So the game is basically like kill the racists, but its handling of the whole race question it is actually pretty clunky and clumsy.
Yeah.
There's this whole subplot about like an uprising from the people, and there's like a black rebel leader, and at one point I think the main character kind of makes a comment to imply that the only difference between the rebel leader and the racist big leader guy is how you spell their names. And it's like, well, no, that's not. You can't say that someone who's been oppressed racially, who tries to cause a violent uprising against their oppressors, is just as bad as the oppressors. Like, that's not correct. That's bollocks.
Yeah.
So there has been a huge backlash really against the game's sort of themes and messages.
And I think even the ending as well. I think when the ending, should we just skip ahead to the ending?
Oh, yeah, go for it. Yeah, there's definitely.
there's this. It's kind of this alternative universe scenario, because you have to try and rescue this girl, and she can sort of cross dimensions.
Yeah, she can. She sort of uses these powers in a really lame way, doesn't she? Like she pulls ammo out of alternates.
That's right.
Like,
yeah.
Why can't she just jump through a wormhole?
Actually, one thing I will say, for large parts of this game, it is what do they call it? God, I should know this.
An escort mission.
Yes, large parts of the game you are with another person, and usually in games it's the most annoying thing. They won't go where you want them to go, they just get in the way. But she actually, I remember thinking, I could be wrong here, but I seem to remember thinking, she was all right. She's actually quite useful.
Yeah, it's Elizabeth. I've just checked.
Elizabeth,
I couldn't remember her name. Yeah, you were right. It was a bit like, The Last of Us managed it as well. Where
yeah, they did.
It manages to tell
better. Actually,
definitely. Hey, that's one we haven't covered, isn't it? Ooh. The sequel's coming out soon. Yeah, blimey, that'll be good. It manages to. So, video games are a very kind of solitary pursuit, often in terms of playing them as well as for the main character, because they haven't really had the technology to have a second person with you, because, you'd have some stupid computer controlled thing blundering off cliffs, or, like you say, the reason people hate escort missions is because the person you're escorting is usually brainless and dies in silly, frustrating ways. And that means you can't have this kind of two-man show kind of thing with two characters talking, which actually works really well in the medium. You're playing the game, and your secondary character, your main character can have conversations with them and progress the plot and develop the characters. And this game does that really well. And I find myself caring lots about Elizabeth. And dead simple, the way they achieved it was she's just invincible. She just can't die. She just convincingly hides during the combat and helps you out. But the bit that was less convincing was her sort of wormhole opening multi-dimensional prowess, because it just seemed a bit like, well, why does she have this? Why can she do this? It doesn't make any sense.
What do you think of she's got a guardian as well, the songbird?
Rubbish. I thought it was rubbish.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh no, I like the songbird.
Again, it just, for whatever reason, it just rubbed me up the wrong way. It was like the big daddies were this brilliant sort of avatar of the game, almost like a mascot, like really impressive, cool. And they were like, oh shit, we need one of them. We haven't got any big daddies because it's a different setting, a different time. Let's have like this big mechanical, like steampunk bird that's meant to protect her. And I personally, I wasn't frightened by it. I didn't think it was cool. It was just like a bit lame. But again,
I thought it was quite good. I thought it made sense because the whole sort of American, eagle.
That's true. Like, I did enjoy the despicable, over-the-top patriotism angle. Like, I liked how the villains were like these all-American sort of patriots with like the George Washington robots, and like it was really sickening. Like that was a cool idea.
I agree that the songbird wasn't scary though.
I mean, this game, you definitely, other than obviously you would describe racism as horror, but in the sense of the horror genre, I wouldn't describe this as a horror game in the same way as the others were.
You're spot on there. Yeah, I'd agree with you there.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it was a huge kind of change in, maybe it's just too much change all in one go, change of tone, change of setting, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
And the ending where, again, spoiler alert, skip ahead maybe 2 minutes, it's revealed that Elizabeth is, Comstock and Booker are the same person, two different versions from two different realities, and Elizabeth is their daughter, who was in effect stolen from Booker. Oh, that's why he's trying to rescue her, isn't it? Because it's his daughter. Stolen from Booker at birth, or soon after birth, by himself, but from a different reality, where he's become this really embittered, horrible, racist piece of shit. And that was kind of a cool reveal, like a cool ending.
Yeah, I remember the ending being quite impressed by initially.
But it's one of those, again, on reflection, it's like, well,
I totally agree with you.
It just didn't ring true. It's almost like he just really wanted a cool ending, and it felt a bit contrived, maybe somehow. I think what hasn't.
But I do remember at the time thinking this was quite cool, because you even sort of go back to Rapture as well briefly, don't you?
That's in, yeah. There is a bit of that when it's revealing the extent of this kind of wormhole jumping. And there was a DLC where you play.
The DLC is in Rapture.
You play as Elizabeth in Rapture, and I thought that was much better than the real game. But that's just
it was good. Yeah, they do good DLC in fairness.
Definitely, I thought that DLC was really good because it was almost like they did this whole like noir detective femme fatale thing.
Right,
it was dead cool, and I just loved being back in Rapture as well. It was like, oh, I love this.
Especially because by this point, you know, the sort of visuals, the graphics had moved on quite a bit.
Yeah,
you know,
they'd perfected it.
People were getting the most out of those consoles. So
we
it was kind of nice seeing it again.
Why do you think? So, given that these games were all, as far as I know, commercially successful and definitely critically successful, apart from the subsequent backlash, why have they stopped making them?
I think there are a couple of reasons. The main thing, I think, is because the Bioshock rights are owned by 2K, and 2K, I think, are quite a greedy studio, actually, publisher, and they do a lot of sports games with like shitloads of microtransactions in them, and single-player games, traditional single-player games, even though when these big studios do them, they tend to do them quite well nowadays. They don't make that long-term money that I think the publishers would rather invest in a game that's going to continue to bring in money
over the long.
You know,
like
that's just Destiny's a great example, or Call of Duty. People are constantly spending money in the game, so these live service games. So there was kind of talk a few years ago that, you know, single-player games are dead, which isn't true because there are still lots of companies. Sony, you know, still invests heavily in them. And I do think they're coming back in general because there's been a bit of a backlash to these kind of live service games. But I do wonder if maybe at some point that had something to do with it, where they just don't see it as being as profitable a franchise.
And it's just not their
as it could.
It's not their business model. So if their business model is we make these types of games that we can coin it for years and years, why would we invest a load of money and get a worse return to make something that might be a bit more artistically, critically acclaimed? But
I think the other thing as well is just the studio. Ken Levine probably, I would have to check this, but probably just doesn't really particularly feels he wants to make any anymore.
A load of them ended up, if I've got my facts right, ended up in, I think it's called Fulbright Studios, who made Gone Home. I think that was a load of ex-Bioshock people, if I've got my facts right.
Well, Irrational is rebranded as Ghost Story Games.
Oh, okay. What have they made anything noteworthy?
I don't think they've really done anything.
It's funny, it just feels like such... I mean, it's not just us who like the original Bioshock. It was massive, it was Game of the Year, raved about... You know, Spawn 2 sequels. It just feels like it's like disappeared. It's really strange.
But he hasn't really done anything since either.
No, I've not heard of Ken, other than hearing various people talking about how he's meant to be a bit of an arsehole, which may or may not be true. Right? There's stories about him like ranting and raving at people, and who knows how true that is. But yeah, he seems to have kind of dropped off the face of the earth. Like there was a point where if somebody had said, "Hey, there's a new Ken Levine game coming out," I'd have been like, "Right, I'm immediate, buy it."
Yeah.
But he's just gone.
I mean, they did announce 2K, that is, who they own the rights to Bioshock. They did announce something towards the end of last year about a possible new Bioshock game being developed by a brand new studio. But I don't know if anything will come of it, and I think they said that it would be a long time coming if it did. And I remember there being a handheld, like a PS Vita, I'm going to say, game that was supposed to come out of Bioshock, but that got cancelled.
Yeah, so even though it's been announced, well, hopefully, fingers crossed, that this means there's a remake.
For me, I wouldn't be surprised if nothing came of it, or if it ended up being a full... next gen remake of the original, which I could see happening.
Oh, fingers crossed.
I'm not sure.
It'd be interesting to see if it's a worthy follow-up, a worthy successor, or a paltry knockoff. Time will tell. And there is an element as well. It's
don't know where else you would take it, but
yeah. Well, that's the point, isn't it? It's like it's the same with any work of fiction. Just because a story was great doesn't mean you can infinitely milk the same story or the same setting indefinitely, because there's a point at which you just run out of stories to tell about that set. In some ways maybe this would have been better if it had been just a pure one-off bloody amazing game, which is really ahead of its time. Like, there are games coming out now that don't look graphically as impressive as that game from 2007. It's an incredible piece of work, really. Well, Liam, is there anything else we've missed, or would you like to summarise your pitch of Bioshock?
No, not really. Just fuck off. No, I don't. I think this is another example. We can go back into the Dark Natter archives, and there are many similar examples of maybe a franchise that perhaps has lost its way a little bit, but the first entry is so strong that I think you've just got to put it into the Hall of Pain. It's the original Bioshock, was groundbreaking at the time. Still one of the best settings in a video game. Still, a brilliant twist halfway through.
Oh, yeah.
Just atmosphere, teaming with it. Just, brilliant game. Maybe the sequels weren't as good, but, I still enjoyed both of them. I just don't think they didn't have the impact of the first one. But, for me, Hall of Pain all the way.
Well, I will consult our special guest who's been sitting patiently next to me all the way through, just waiting for this final moment, which is Frank. Have you got anything to say?
Hey, kid. So you want to pitch Bioshock, huh? For a place in the Hall of Pain? I'm going to give you a world of pain.
Oh, I can't be bothered. I feel like my impression earlier was better. I've lost it.
Yeah, you have. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. But yeah, it's definitely in. As you say, the first game is so good. I reckon the impact of that twist on me, it was like the best twist, not just in games, but like, I can't think of a better one. I can't think of a twist that's had me more kind of goosebump, jaw on the floor, like, oh my god, this is amazing, I can't believe they've done this to me. Just brilliant. So yeah, regardless of my view of the sequels, which by the way, there's lots of positives. Bioshock 2, great game, great gameplay, great DLC, lovely to revisit Rapture. Bioshock Infinite, great setting, interesting story. Lots of people really enjoyed the combat. It just wasn't my cup of tea. But regardless of those two, just purely on the strength of the original, it is definitely in. It's a worthy entrant into the Hall of Pain. Well,
cool.
Thank you, Liam, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm off to inject some gruesome plasmids into my eyeballs, and enjoy whatever you're up to, everyone.
Yeah, you too.
And we will see you. Final special announcement. We have had our first ever fan of the show suggest a thing.
We have. Yeah.
Amazing. It's like we're basically celebrities, like A-listers now.
They weren't family members either.
Yeah, no, it's an actual person who actually listens to the show and actually allegedly claims to enjoy it. So yeah, Abby, thank you for listening.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, we appreciate it.
Lovely to hear from you. And she has formally requested, in writing, in triplicate, signed in blood. I don't know if it was her blood or if she murdered someone or, slaughtered a whatever, but it was pretty gruesome. Formally requested that we do, in our next episode, The League of Gentlemen.
Oh.
Which neither of us have ever watched back in the day. But
I am a big fan of Inside Number 9. So,
yeah, it's ace in it. So it's about time.
I'm optimistic with this one.
Yeah, we'll. So we're gonna. I think we're gonna do at least the first series because it's only 6 episodes, and then
and let's face it, everything else has gotten into the Hall of Pain. So surely.
We'll see. The luck's bound to run out. Maybe we'll both really hate it, and then Abby will stop listening to the show, and then we'll have, a 50% drop in listeners. Hopefully not. So yeah, tune in next time to see how our first ever sort of... Well, it's not our first ever guest pitch, is it? Because Ryan did one when he came on the show, but it's our first ever listener pitch.
Fan request.
Fan request.
So, yeah, thanks for listening, everyone, and
we'll see you next time. Goodbye. It's over.
Cool.
I'm gonna stop recording.
Hey kid, Frank Fontaine here. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Dark Natter podcast. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can follow us on Twitter at dark_natter or on Instagram at Dark Natter Podcast. And please leave us a 5-star review if you can be bothered. If you want to get in touch to suggest a future topic just like Abby did, then please do, and I'll make sure that pair of goddamn limeys give you the attention you deserve. Tune in soon for another Dark Natter, if you got the stomach for it.